Okay, what if I told you the secret to building a billion-dollar company isn't some brilliant, brand new idea? What if it's just copying? That's what we're going to do today. We're diving deep into the Y Combinator playbook, using their own data to figure out the business models and pricing tricks that the best startups use to absolutely crush it.
You see this all the time, right? A founder builds a great product, they even get some users, but then nothing. The business just stalls out. It's totally stagnant. Growth is flatlined. Investors are saying no thanks. And you're just left scratching your head, wondering what went wrong. It's got to be one of the most frustrating feelings in the world.
Well, the answer is actually surprisingly simple. And it's really the whole point of what we're talking about today. The problem? It's usually not the product. It's the business model. See, the secret to hitting it big isn't about inventing some crazy new way to make money. It's about picking a model that's already been proven to work and then just executing the heck out of it. The mantra is simple, and you should remember this. Innovate on the product, but copy the business model.
All right, so here's the game plan. First, we're going to look at the 3 business models that just completely dominate the startup world. Then, we'll zoom in even further and uncover the secrets of the absolute top 10 unicorns. After that, we'll get super practical with 5 rules for pricing your product. And to wrap it all up, we've got an incredible story of a company that went from charging $0 to a $3 billion buyout.
So, the big question is, which models actually work? The cool thing is, we don't have to guess. We're going to dive straight into the data from Y Combinator's top 100 most valuable companies. This is like getting a peek behind the curtain to see what it really takes to win at the highest level. And when you look at pretty much any billion-dollar company out there, they almost always fit into one of these 9 categories. You've got your classic SaaS, transactional businesses, marketplaces, the list goes on. But the main takeaway here, the number of proven venture scale models is actually really small. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you actually analyze that list, a super clear pattern pops out. Things narrow down, like a lot. Software as a service, or SaaS, makes up 31%. Transactional models, that's 22%. And marketplaces are 14%. So get this, just 3 models, free, are responsible for 2/3 of the most valuable companies to ever come out of YC. That's not a coincidence. That is a massive signal.
Okay, but hold on, because it gets even crazier. In the startup world, there's this thing called a power law. Basically, it means the winners don't just win by a little bit, they win by an insane amount. We're talking orders of magnitude bigger than everyone else. So let's zoom in on the true giants of the list, the top 10.
So just how extreme is this? Check this out. A full 50%, half, of the entire value of the top 100 companies comes from just the top 10. I mean, think about that for a second. Half the value from just 10% of the companies. That's nuts. So the million-dollar question, or billion-dollar question really, is what are they doing that's so different?
And here it is. This is the answer. Look at how that top 10 is built. 5 of them, 5, are marketplaces. We're talking about companies like Airbnb and DoorDash. Another 3 are transactional businesses. Stripe, Coinbase. Now remember, SaaS was the most common model in the top 100 overall. But when you look at the absolute peak, it's all about marketplaces and transactional models. They completely dominate. So, why do marketplaces win so big? Well, it all boils down to one incredibly powerful idea: network effects. Think about it. Every new host that joins Airbnb makes the platform better for all the travelers. Every new restaurant on DoorDash makes it more valuable for every single customer. It creates this amazing feedback loop, a winner-take-all situation that becomes almost impossible for a competitor to challenge. And what about those transactional businesses? Well, their secret is all about being right in the middle of the money. Think about a company like Stripe. They're not just some tool a business uses, they're the actual pipes, the infrastructure that lets the money flow. And when you're that essential, it's pretty easy to take a tiny piece of every transaction. Plus, it's a huge pain for your customers to even think about switching away. It's also super telling to look at what's not on this list. You won't find any consulting agencies or service businesses in the top 100. And why is that? Simple. They scale with people, not with software. That means you're stuck with one-off projects, not recurring revenue. You have lower margins, and there's a hard limit on how fast you can grow. VCs are hunting for businesses that can scale to the moon, and that means scaling with code, not headcount. All right, so let's say you've picked your proven business model. Awesome. but that's only half the battle. Now we got to talk about the other half of the equation, pricing. And here's the key mindset shift you need to make. Your price isn't just a number on a website. It's one of the most powerful tools you have for learning what your customers actually care about and how much value you're really creating.
So YC's advice on pricing really comes down to 5 simple rules, and it all kicks off with the most important one, the one you absolutely cannot skip. You have to charge for your product. I know, so many founders are just terrified of asking for money, but charging isn't just about making a buck. It's the single best test to see if you've built something that people genuinely value. Okay, rule number 2, price on value, not on your costs. This little formula here is everything. Think of it like this. Your price needs to sit somewhere in that sweet spot between what it costs you to run the thing and the value the customer gets out of it. The space between your cost and your price, that's your profit. And the space between your price and the customer's perceived value, that's your room to grow and raise prices down the line.
So, how do you know if you're even in the right ballpark? I love this quote. It's just perfect. The ideal price is when customers complain a little, but they still pay. Think about that. If you tell someone your price and they immediately say, "Yes, deal," you're probably too cheap. That sweet spot is when they pause, maybe they push back a bit, but the value is so obviously there that they pay anyway. That little bit of friction, that's actually a really good sign.
And that brings us right to rule number 3, which is that most startups are just flat out undercharging. A low price feels like a good idea, but it's not a real advantage. In fact, it can seriously backfire. It can signal to customers that your product is kind of cheap or not that valuable, maybe even untrustworthy. A higher price, on the other hand, signals confidence. It says, this is a quality product. And, super importantly, it gives you the money you need to grow faster than your competition.
Okay, to really see how all these rules work in the real world, I want to tell you a story that just ties everything together perfectly. This is the story of Segment, a YC company, and their wild journey from charging basically nothing to getting bought for over $3 billion. So the founders of Segment were engineers. And like a lot of engineers, they weren't really used to paying for software. So they just kind of assumed nobody would want to pay for their software either. So naturally, they started by giving it away for free. But then, investors came knocking and they needed to show some revenue. So they very reluctantly decided, okay, I guess we have to charge something. And what was that first price? A super timid $10 a month. They were absolutely terrified that their users were going to freak out and leave. But what happened was the complete opposite of what they expected. Customers literally wrote back to them shocked at how low the price was. They were saying things like, hey, you guys need to charge us more. We can't trust you with our critical data if we don't think you'll be in business next year. Their low price wasn't a selling point. It was a huge red flag. Now this is the turning point in the story. They hired their first sales advisor. And this guy immediately saw the massive value they were offering to big companies. And right before their first major sales call, he lays down an ultimatum. He says, you are going to go into that meeting and ask for $120,000 a year, or I quit. I mean, to the founders, this number was just from another planet. It was completely insane.
So what happens? The CEO gets on the call, he's nervous, probably sweating, and he blurts out the $120,000 price. The customer, of course, negotiates, but they ended up closing the deal at $18,000 a year. Now, they didn't get the full $120K, but think about this. In one conversation, they went from $120 a year to $18,000. That's a 150x price increase. And it happened for one reason. They were finally forced to just ask for it. The lessons here are they're huge. First, the founder's idea of their own product's value was completely wrong. It wasn't even close. Second, by having the guts to ask for that huge price, they unlocked a whole new type of customer, big enterprise clients who saw massive value in what they were doing. And that single shift in thinking, that change in pricing, is what put them on the direct path to being acquired by Twilio for more than $3 billion. And that really brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. Look, you might have built an amazing product, but the real lesson from YC's very best is that building it is only half the job. The real billion-dollar question you have to answer is this: what is its actual value? And are you brave enough to ask for what it's worth?